So there are two women, roughly the same age, living about 8 miles apart across the Strait of Gibraltar, and their lives look almost nothing alike. One of them has her own bank account, her own degree, and her own paycheck. The other one likely doesn't have any of those three things, and in her culture that isn't even considered unusual. So today, we're comparing Moroccan women and Spanish women, two cultures separated by a narrow strip of water, but divided by an enormous gap in how women actually live day to day. And by the end of this, you're going to have a strong opinion about which side of that gap you'd rather be on. Stick around, because some of these numbers are going to surprise you either way. Let's start with education, because the numbers here are honestly hard to believe until you see them side by side. In Spain, more than 58% of women between 24 and 34 have finished university. In Morocco, that number sits at roughly 15%. That's not a small gap, that's nearly 4 times the rate, and it shapes almost everything else on this list. Spain built its modern education system around universal access for both genders decades ago, while large parts of Morocco, especially outside major cities, still treat higher education for women as optional rather than expected, something a family may or may not prioritize, depending on tradition, income, or how far the nearest university actually is. That education gap feeds directly into the workforce. Around 50% of Spanish women participate in the labor force, working real jobs with real paychecks. In Morocco, that number drops to somewhere around 19 to 21%. And this isn't really about ambition or ability. It comes down to infrastructure and social expectation. Morocco has a very limited number of kindergartens and childcare centers available, so once a Moroccan woman has children, going back to work often just isn't practical even if she wants to. On top of that, plenty of employers simply don't hire women for certain roles, and the broader cultural expectation still leans heavily toward women staying home once they're married, running the household rather than building a career. Spain moved away from that model generations ago, and it shows directly in the employment numbers. Now here's where the gap becomes personal rather than just statistical, and that's financial independence. In Spain, nearly every adult woman has her own bank account, her own income, and full control over her own money. In Morocco, only about a third of women have a bank account at all, and the gender gap in account ownership is one of the widest in the entire region, with men holding accounts at nearly double the rate of women. That means for a huge share of Moroccan women, financial independence simply isn't part of daily life. Money runs through the household, usually controlled by a husband or father, rather than through her own name. A Spanish woman can leave a bad marriage, start a business, or make a major purchase without asking anyone's permission. For a large percentage of Moroccan women, that level of financial autonomy still isn't the norm. Health tells a more complicated story, and it doesn't fall neatly on one side. Spain has one of the longest average lifespans on the entire planet, consistently ranking near the very top of global health rankings, with excellent access to hospitals, specialists, and preventative care built into a universal public healthcare system that nearly every citizen relies on. But that same modern lifestyle comes with a cost. Spain has been seeing rising rates of obesity, high blood pressure, and dementia, the same pattern showing up across most wealthy, sedentary, processed food-heavy nations, where convenience and abundance quietly work against long-term health, even as medical care keeps people alive longer. Morocco, by comparison, has historically had lower rates of these lifestyle diseases, partly because of a more traditional diet built around fresh vegetables, grains, and home cooking, and partly because daily routines still involve more walking and physical activity than the car-dependent lifestyle common in much of urban Spain. That said, Morocco has only recently started expanding real access to regular doctor visits and preventative health care for its broader population, especially in rural areas. So while lifestyle disease rates may be lower, access to consistent medical care still lags well behind what Spain offers. So Spain wins clearly on lifespan and medical access, but loses ground on the modern lifestyle diseases that tend to come along with wealth and convenience. Family plays out completely differently between the two cultures too. In Moroccan households, being a devoted mother and a strong presence at home is treated as one of the most respected roles a woman can hold, and raising children well is considered central to a woman's identity and success within the community. Multiple generations often live close together, sometimes under the same roof, and family obligation runs deep, visiting parents weekly, caring for elders directly rather than relying on outside care, keeping the household connected across generations in a way that shapes nearly every major decision a woman makes. Spain has moved in a different direction over the past few decades, where personal independence, career, and individual identity tend to take priority over the family-centered model that still defines daily life in Morocco, and it's now common for Spanish women to delay marriage and children well into their 30s in favor of building a career first. Neither approach is inherently right, but the two cultures are training women toward completely different definitions of what a successful life actually looks like, one measured by personal achievement and independence, the other measured by the strength and closeness of the family unit around her. Religion and daily rhythm shape a lot of this too. Morocco is a predominantly Muslim country, and the 5 daily prayers, the structure of Ramadan, and the broader rhythm of Islamic tradition are woven into the fabric of everyday life in a way that shapes schedules, family behavior, and social expectations from childhood onward. Spain, despite its deeply Catholic history, has become one of the most secular countries in Europe, with religion playing a much smaller role in how most people actually structure their daily lives. So a Moroccan woman's day is often built around a shared spiritual rhythm with her entire community, while a Spanish woman's day is built almost entirely around personal schedule and preference. Marriage and legal rights add another layer of contrast. Spain has some of the most progressive family law in Europe, no-fault divorce, full legal equality between spouses, and strong protections against domestic abuse enforced through dedicated courts and a national system built specifically to fast-track cases involving violence against women. Morocco reformed its family code back in 2004, called the Mutawana, which raised the legal marriage age and expanded women's rights within marriage significantly compared to before, giving women more say in divorce proceedings and child custody than they'd had under the previous system. But enforcement still varies a lot depending on region, and traditional expectations around a husband's authority in the household remain strong in many families, especially outside big cities like Casablanca and Rabat, where change tends to move a lot slower than the law technically allows. Even something as simple as fashion and daily dress reflects the divide. Spanish women generally dress however they want, no cultural expectation tied to modesty or tradition, fashion driven purely by personal taste and European trends. In Morocco, many women wear the hijab, or more modest clothing, as an expression of religious identity and cultural tradition, and this is generally treated as a personal and spiritual choice rather than something imposed, though the social pressure to conform to it varies a lot by family and by region. It's a real visible marker of how differently the two cultures approach the relationship between a woman's identity and her community's expectations. Hospitality culture in Morocco is also genuinely striking. Mint tea gets poured for any guest who walks through the door, and turning a visitor away without offering food or drink is considered almost unthinkable. Markets, or souks, remain central to daily life in a lot of Moroccan cities. Loud, colorful, deeply social spaces where haggling and conversation are part of the shopping experience itself, not just a transaction. Spain has its own version of this through cafe culture and long, late dinners. But the specific warmth and ritual around welcoming guests runs even deeper in Moroccan tradition, tied closely to both religious values and older tribal customs around generosity. Art and music trace a similar cultural split. Spain built an entire global identity around flamenco, an art form that grew out of raw emotion, movement, and expression, and it's still taught, performed, and celebrated across the country as a source of national pride. Morocco has its own deeply rooted musical tradition too, particularly Gnawa music, which blends African, Berber, and Arab influences into ceremonial rhythms that go back centuries and are still performed at festivals that draw visitors from around the world. Both cultures treat art as something tied to identity rather than just entertainment, but the emotional language each one speaks through is completely different. Flamenco built around individual passion and personal expression, Gnawa built around community, ritual, and spiritual connection. Cuisine tells its own version of this story. Spanish food culture revolves around tapas, small shared plates, long meals, and a very social approach to eating that stretches dinner into a multi-hour event most nights of the week. Moroccan cuisine leans heavily on slow-cooked tagines, communal dishes eaten by hand from a shared plate, and a much stronger tradition of home cooking passed down through generations of women in the family, often treated as a skill that carries real cultural weight rather than just a chore. Where Spanish food culture centers around going out and socializing publicly, Moroccan food culture centers more around the home and the family table, another small but telling reflection of how each culture defines connection. Tourism and economic opportunity add one more layer worth mentioning. Spain is part of the European Union, which gives Spanish women automatic access to freedom of movement, employment, and healthcare across dozens of countries, along with protections backed by the EU for workplace equality and parental leave. Morocco sits just outside that system entirely, and while its tourism industry has grown massively over the past 2 decades, opportunities for women specifically in that industry, including guiding, hospitality management, and entrepreneurship, remain far more limited by the same infrastructure and hiring gaps mentioned earlier. So even the doors that are opening in Morocco's modernizing economy are not opening equally for women the way they already have in Spain. So here's the honest way to look at all of this. This isn't really a question of which woman is happier or which one is living the objectively better life, because those two things are being measured by completely different standards in each culture. A Spanish woman is measuring success through independence, career, and personal freedom. A Moroccan woman is often measuring success through family, faith, and her role within a tightly connected household and community. What the data does make clear is that when it comes to education, financial independence, and workforce access, Spain gives women dramatically more structural opportunity to build an independent life if that's what they want. Morocco gives women a much stronger built-in support system of family, tradition, and community, but at a real cost to personal autonomy and financial freedom for a large percentage of women. So the real question isn't which woman is better, it's whether you value independence and opportunity more or family and tradition more, because right now these two cultures are answering that question in almost opposite directions. Let me know which side you're on in the comments.